Hi, I'm Reelin. I was finalizing a $72 million contract when I got the call. My sister, 8 months pregnant, was on the floor bleeding. Her husband had kicked her, hard, then left her there. I dropped everything. But when we got to court, they didn't believe her. Not the judge, not our mother, not even my other sister. They called her dramatic, emotional, said she probably fell. So tell me, how does a woman survive that much pain and still end up being the one on trial? And what kind of family watches her bleed and chooses silence? The hotel suite was quiet, too quiet for the weight of the morning ahead. I sat cross-legged on the edge of the king-sized bed, balancing my tablet in one hand and my coffee in the other. The sun hadn't risen yet, but Charlotte's skyline blinked faintly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Final slides, contract details, every line was airtight. I'd been prepping this pitch for over 9 months. $72 million. Enough to elevate my agency, wipe out every trace of my divorce, and finally get my name spoken in boardrooms without anyone attaching it to a man. The silence made me uneasy, though, not nerves, something else. The kind of stillness right before a glass shatters. My phone buzzed once, then again. I glanced at the screen. Narina, 5:48 a.m. I frowned. She knew better than to call this early, especially today. The third buzz came with a voicemail, but I didn't wait. I answered. All I heard was breathing, shaky, sharp, desperate. Narina? I asked, sitting upright. What's going on? Then came her voice, slurred and fragmented like she was whispering between breaths. He kicked me. Reelin, I'm bleeding. I think. The baby. My chest went hollow. What? Where are you? She sobbed. Home. I can't. Get up. He's gone. Please. I didn't ask another question. I dropped the tablet. My coffee spilled across the bedspread, but I didn't even notice. I was already halfway to the door, grabbing my coat, keys, and purse in one sweep. My assistant, Paula, knocked just as I opened it. Hey, we need your I'm leaving. I cut her off. Her eyes widened. The deal. Cancel it. What? Reelin, this is 72? Cancel it, I snapped, already moving. Send my apologies. Family emergency. Elevators always feel slow when your heart is in your throat. By the time I reached the parking level, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from fury. I didn't even bother plugging in GPS. I knew where they lived. Mid-range suburban development on the edge of Matthews. 15 minutes from the hotel if you didn't hit traffic. Less if you ran every light. I did. The early morning sky was still bruised with night, a deep gray smothering the horizon. As I pulled into their street, I realized I couldn't remember a single second of the drive. My brain had blocked it out, like I'd gone on autopilot. Her house came into view, porch light on, front door slightly ajar. My pulse kicked harder. I killed the engine, bolted out. The hinges squeaked as I pushed the door open. There was blood on the floor, a thin trail starting from the hallway, smearing across the tiles like something dragged. And there, right in the middle of the living room, was Narina's mother-in-law, mopping, not crying, not calling 911, just wiping. Where is she? I barked. She glanced up, expression blank. In the back. Bedroom. My heels clicked violently against the floor as I stormed down the hallway. A part of me noted the quiet. No baby monitor, no panicked footsteps, just stillness, suffocating and wrong. When I found her, Narina was curled on her side, blood soaking through the cotton fabric of her pajamas. Her hand clutched her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together. I dropped to my knees beside her. Hey, I'm here. I got you. Her eyes barely opened. He left, she whispered. Said I was making a scene. I could feel the rage surging through me, hot and wild. But I shoved it down. We're calling an ambulance, now. I stormed back into the living room. Her father-in-law was sitting calmly on the couch, watching a muted news channel. Did you call 911? I demanded. He didn't even turn. It's not our place. My voice rose. She's carrying your grandchild. The mother-in-law just kept mopping. "You're making it worse." No one moved. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 myself, gave them the address, told them the truth. Then I went back to Narina, sat beside her on the bloodied carpet, held her hand like I did when we were kids and she got scared of thunderstorms. "I'm not going anywhere," I murmured. "You hear me? I've got you." Outside, I finally heard the distant wail of a siren. Not fast enough. As the sound grew closer, Narina's grip weakened, but her lips moved. "Rylan?" "Yeah?" "Don't let him say it was my fault." I blinked hard. "He won't. I promise you that." She closed her eyes, and I looked around, at the blood-stained rug, the indifferent faces, the lies soaked into the walls. This house wasn't just hiding secrets, it was built on them, and I was done letting them stay buried. The sirens never felt close enough. I sat beside Narina in the ambulance, clutching her hand like I was anchoring her to the world. The paramedic was shouting codes I didn't understand while pressing something against her abdomen. Her face was pale, her lips whispering soundless words. I leaned in, my voice steady, even though my stomach twisted. "Stay with me, baby girl. You're not going anywhere." The ambulance bounced slightly as we turned onto the hospital grounds. I caught a glimpse of the emergency room lights through the back windows, cold, sterile, blinding. We rolled in fast, the doors flew open, and Narina was gone from my grip, wheeled down a hallway before I could stand. I stayed still for a beat, then followed. The scent of antiseptic hit me first, then the chorus of beeping machines, intercom buzzes, and muffled crying down another hall. I stood there, suddenly just another bystander in a white-tiled maze of urgency. My shirt had blood on the sleeve, hers. It had soaked through when she reached for me. I didn't notice until a nurse glanced at it, then at me. Her expression didn't change. "Ma'am, please step to the side," someone said. I did, mechanically. I waited. 10 minutes, maybe 20. I couldn't sit. My legs wouldn't let me. So I stood, pacing tight loops outside the trauma bay doors. Then I heard his voice. Darren. He came in through the main doors, his hair messy, shirt wrinkled, like he'd just rolled out of bed. His voice cracked at the nurse's station. My wife fell down the stairs. She's 8 months pregnant. Please. She's in trauma?" He sounded like any other concerned husband. Except I knew better. He knew exactly where she was. He knew what he'd done. And now he was here, painting over it. "She fell," he repeated, louder this time, shaking his head with just the right mix of guilt and panic. "I told her to take it easy." "I shouldn't have gone out for that walk. I should have been home." I stepped forward. The nurse looked at both of us. "Are you family too?" "I'm her sister," I said quickly. "I was there. I'm the one who called the ambulance." Darren turned to me, his expression carefully composed. "Rylan," he said with a nod, voice calm now. "Thank God you're here." I stared at him. I said nothing. The nurse's eyes darted between us. Something in her expression changed. Not belief, but hesitation. Darren's performance continued in full color. Hands in his pockets. Deep sigh. Just enough vulnerability. "She's been so tired lately. She gets dizzy. I've been telling her to rest more." I wanted to punch the wall. Instead, I turned to the nurse. "You need to make sure she's protected from him. Now." The nurse blinked. "We'll inform the attending physician. Security will be nearby." But I saw it. How she hesitated. How Darren's words had already worked their way into the narrative. He looked the part. I looked angry. Truth didn't matter if it wasn't charming. A doctor finally emerged from behind the swinging double doors. "We're monitoring for placental abruption and fetal distress," he said, glancing between Darren and me. "She's stable for now, but we're watching everything closely." I asked, "Has she said anything?" She was semi-coherent, whispered a few words, mostly shock. "We've given her something to ease the pain. No movement from the baby yet, but we're hopeful." Darren took a sharp breath, stepped in. She must have lost her balance. Our stairs have this one loose tile. I've been meaning to fix it." I cut him off. "You mean the tile you've known about for 4 months and ignored?" He blinked. "Rylan, I'm not here to argue." "No, you're here to act." His jaw clenched. Before he could respond, another figure approached. My mother. Isolde walked toward us in her long navy coat, arms tightly folded. Her lipstick was perfect. Her expression unreadable. She didn't even look at me. Is she awake? She asked the doctor. Not fully, ma'am, but stable. Isolde nodded, then finally turned to me. You didn't mention how bad it was. I frowned. You mean the blood? Or the fact that her husband left her on the floor and walked away? Isolde pursed her lips. You know Narina's always had episodes, emotional waves. Ever since high school, she catastrophizes. I stared at her. You can't be serious. She smoothed her coat. You're being dramatic, Rillin. Let the doctors do their job. Accusations won't help anyone right now. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I stepped back. You're right. Accusations won't help. But facts will. She raised a brow. And you're the only one who has those, I suppose? No, but I'm the only one willing to speak them out loud. I turned away before I said something I couldn't take back. Outside the ER doors, the morning sun had crept higher, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I leaned against the wall and pulled out my phone. I called a contact in legal aid. I need guidance, I said. Fast. He listened quietly. Then, document everything, every detail, every person, every word. Already started. When the call ended, I opened my notes app. I typed, 5:48 a.m. Narina calls. Says Darren kicked her. 6:10 a.m. Arrive at their house. Blood on the floor. Mother-in-law mopping. 6:14 a.m. 911 called by me. No prior call made. 6:27 a.m. Darren arrives at ER. Claims fall story. Performs concern. 6:33 a.m. Isolde arrives. Doubts Narina. Calls me dramatic. I kept going, filing facts like ammunition. My fingers moved faster than my thoughts, because if I stopped for even a second, I'd feel it, the weight of betrayal, the slap of silence from people who were supposed to care. But instead, they cared more about avoiding conflict than protecting a bleeding woman. I looked up at the sterile ceiling, took a long breath. If even my own mother wouldn't believe her, I'd make the whole damn city listen. I stayed in my car for nearly 10 minutes after leaving the hospital, staring at my phone screen, waiting for something, anything. A missed call, a message, a sign that someone in our family was going to step up, say something, act like this wasn't normal. Nothing came. No blinking dots, no concerned voicemails, just silence. We carry silence in our blood, some more than others. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows over my dashboard. The world kept turning outside while everything inside me stayed still. I tapped the steering wheel a few times, trying to ground myself, then drove the 15 minutes back to my place, window cracked, radio off. My mind was louder than anything the car could have played. Once home, I didn't even take off my coat. I dropped my keys, opened my laptop, and pulled up the patient portal. I knew the hospital's system. I'd helped rebrand their community outreach program a year ago. I also knew how slow bureaucracy could bury the truth. Sure enough, the ER report had already been posted under Narina's name. I skimmed until I found the line that made my stomach twist. Fall suspected. No signs of external trauma documented. That was it. That one sentence reduced everything to an accident. Like blood on the tile was some household spill and not the result of a boot to the stomach. He got to them first. I called the hospital immediately. Not the front desk. No, I went straight to administration. I asked for the supervisor overseeing emergency room protocol. When they connected me, I introduced myself, using my full name and mentioning our previous collaboration. There was a pause, then a flat voice answered. Ms. Ashton, how can I help? I have a question about ER protocol for potential domestic violence cases, I said, keeping my tone even. What triggers an internal report? If a patient shows visible injuries consistent with assault or verbally discloses violence, we are required to notify social services and begin a protective process. Even if the partner speaks first? Another pause. We evaluate all input, but the patient's report takes precedence, assuming they are coherent. And if they're not, then we rely on context, statements from present individuals, such as a husband. Yes. I closed my eyes. Even when the husband is the reason she's incoherent? There was no answer. I thanked them and hung up before I said something that could be used against me later. Back in my kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink. My hands were steady now. Not calm, just trained. I opened a second window on my laptop and started a new document titled Timeline N Case. I listed every detail I could remember. 5:48 a.m. Narina calls, says he kicked me, bleeding, baby. 6:10 a.m. Arrive at house. A blood trail visible, MIL cleaning. 6:11 a.m. No ambulance on scene. 6:14 a.m. I call 911. 6:27 a.m. Darren arrives at hospital, performs concern. 6:33 a.m. Isolde arrives, doubts Narina. 7:02 a.m. ER report. Fall suspected. I didn't stop writing until I filled 2 pages with timestamps and tone notes. Once I felt my chest starting to tighten again, I closed the lid of the laptop and grabbed my coat. I needed to look someone in the eye. I needed a witness, even if it was just to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I drove across town to Callista's office. She worked as a senior administrator at a private school, had for years. The place was pristine, like everything in her life, orderly, predictable, detached. Her receptionist raised an eyebrow when I walked in without an appointment. She's in a meeting. She'll want to see me, I said, sharper than I meant to be. A few minutes later, Callista stepped out. Tailored dress. Perfect hair. She offered a small, tight smile. Relène, I heard. I followed her into her office, sat before she could offer. She's not okay, I said. You know that, right? Callista leaned back slowly. I wasn't sure what to believe. Darren said she slipped. Darren's a liar, I snapped. I was there. I saw the blood. I saw the floor. She glanced at the framed photo of her own family on her desk. This is complicated. You rushing into rooms, throwing accusations. It doesn't help her case. She almost lost her baby. Callista's mouth pressed into a line. That's awful, truly. But if this becomes a legal case, don't drag the rest of the family into it. I blinked. Excuse me? She avoided eye contact now. I'm just saying, everyone has things on the line. Reputation, finances, connections. That's when it clicked. I stood. Your husband still has that pending loan application with Darren's company, doesn't he? Callista didn't answer. You're protecting your credit score over your sister's life. You're twisting things. No, I said. I'm finally seeing them clearly. I walked out. That evening, as the sky dimmed and the wind picked up, I sat on my balcony with a blanket around my shoulders and thought about Narina as a little girl, how she used to cry whenever the lights flickered in our childhood home, how she'd climb into my bed and press her tiny hand into mine, whispering, "You'll tell Mom if I'm scared, right?" I always told her yes, but Mom never listened the way she should have. She always saw Narina's emotions as excess, something to correct, not understand. She needs structure, she used to say. Too sensitive. Even then, I think Narina knew the world didn't take women like her seriously. The quiet ones, the soft ones, the ones who still saw good in people, even when they bled from their hands. That's why she stayed so long, and that's why I couldn't sit still anymore. By 9, I was back at my desk. I opened a new document and started writing my personal account. Not for the police, not for the press, for the court, for the lawyers, for anyone who would try to twist the truth into something unrecognizable. I wrote down every interaction with Darren I'd witnessed, moments that now made sense in reverse. The bruises she hid under sleeves, the way she flinched when he raised his voice, even in laughter, the tension in her smile. I listed names, times, locations, witnesses. I wasn't building a story. I was building a wall. To protect her. To protect the truth. As I reached the final line of the day's entry, I paused, fingers hovering over the keys. Then I typed, "They erased her bruises with a line of ink. I'll rewrite the truth in fire. And I meant it. By the time I parked in front of my childhood home, the sky had turned that soft copper shade that comes right before dusk in late November. I sat in the driveway for a while, rereading the testimony I'd written the night before. My fingers itched to revise it, tighten this phrase, soften that line. But I knew it wasn't the writing I was hesitating over. It was the conversation waiting behind that front door. If truth couldn't bring them to their senses, maybe shame would. I stepped out, smoothed my coat, and walked up the pathway like I'd done hundreds of times growing up. Same cracked stepping stone near the azalea bush. Same rusted wind chime by the porch that never really caught the wind. And somehow, it felt like I was walking into enemy territory. Isolde opened the door before I knocked. "You're late," she said, as if we were gathering for Easter brunch instead of the most awkward meal in recent memory. "I had something to finish," I replied, stepping in without waiting for her to move aside. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner and stale silence. I hung my coat and followed the faint clatter of dishes into the dining room. Callista was already seated, sipping wine like she hadn't ignored every one of my calls. Her husband wasn't there, probably hiding behind his financial ties to Darren. Lumen, Darren's sister, sat with one leg crossed over the other, perfectly manicured fingers tapping her phone screen under the table. Why she was even invited, I didn't ask. Isolde liked to pretend things were fine when they were falling apart. And there, at the end of the table, was Narina, shoulders hunched, eyes down, fork moving food she wouldn't eat. "Glad you could join us," Aunt Eleanor said from across the table, her tone dry, as she passed a bowl of potatoes. "We figured it was time to talk, calmly, as a family." "Is that what this is?" I asked, sitting. "A family dinner? Looks more like a deposition without the stenographer." Isolde shot me a warning glance. "Enough, Rylan." I bit my tongue. Barely. Plates passed. Small talk was forced. No one asked about the hospital. No one mentioned the bruises Narina still tried to hide with long sleeves. The whole room tiptoed around the elephant lying unconscious on a trauma bed just 2 days ago. Then Eleanor, never one to miss an opportunity to pour salt on fresh wounds, spoke. "You know, my first husband and I had some bad nights, too," she said casually, like she was reminiscing about old recipes. "But we didn't air our laundry in public. Every marriage has a bad night." My hand clenched under the table. Narina flinched. "Excuse me?" I said. Eleanor didn't even blink. "I'm just saying, because you girls are quick to escalate." "That boy's career could be destroyed over a misunderstanding." "That boy kicked his pregnant wife," I replied, my voice sharp. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's assault." Isolde intervened. "Rylan, please, not at the table." "Oh, now it's inappropriate. Now we want boundaries?" Lumen snorted. "Honestly, this whole thing is getting out of hand. Social media's already buzzing. People are talking." I turned to her. "Then maybe they should be. Maybe people need to talk more when women end up in hospitals because their husbands have a bad night." The room went quiet. That's when my phone buzzed in my lap. A text. From my legal contact. "Darren filed for mental health eval on Narina. Claims postpartum delusions. Motion is already on the judge's desk." My jaw clenched. I stood. "Well," I said, holding up my phone, "Darren just filed paperwork suggesting Narina's mentally unstable, that she's a danger to her own child. He's building a case to paint her as paranoid and unfit." Everyone froze. Callista looked down at her plate. Isolde set her wineglass down with a soft clink. "That might not be the worst thing," she said carefully. "Maybe she does need help. She's been fragile lately." The room didn't spin, but it may as well have. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "She's overwhelmed," Isolde added. "She cries a lot. She's isolated. Darren says—" I cut her off. "You're quoting him now. Darren? The man who left her on the floor bleeding? Rylan?" "No," I snapped louder now. "Let's call this what it is. You're all more concerned with appearances than with what's real. And you know what? That's not new. That's how it's always been." "Don't make this about you," Callista muttered. I laughed bitterly. "It's never been about me. That's the problem. I've spent my whole life being the one who steps in quietly, fixes things quietly, cleans up quietly. Well, not anymore. I pushed back from the table. If you think silence will protect you, let me remind you, so does rot. And then I walked out. No one followed. It wasn't until I was halfway down the driveway that the cold air hit my skin. I pulled my coat tighter, the fabric suddenly heavier than before. Driving home, I didn't put on music. I didn't call anyone. I just let the weight settle where it wanted, let the echo of my mother's voice and Eleanor's indifference play over and over until they stopped hurting. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys, and stood in the kitchen, trying to remember if I'd eaten anything all day. I hadn't. But I wasn't hungry. Instead, I went to my bedroom, opened the top drawer of my nightstand, and pulled out the folder I kept tucked away, copies of hospital protocol, screenshots, photos Narina once sent me from months ago. The kind of things you don't know how to categorize, so you just label them just in case. Just in case turned out to be now. I paced once around the living room, then pulled out my phone. One contact, one message. I need surveillance support, today. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for me to type the words I'd been rehearsing in my head all day. Draft. Statement of protective custody. Just typing the phrase made my chest tighten. Not from fear, from finality. If I submitted this, it meant I was done hoping the system would fix itself. It meant I was done waiting for someone else to take the risk. The document stared back at me like a dare. I minimized the window and stood, pacing the apartment with a nervous energy I hadn't felt since college finals. The call to my private investigator had gone out hours ago. The arrangements were in motion, but I needed more than surveillance. I needed strategy. The next morning, I took a detour on the way to the hospital and stopped by a parking garage 3 blocks from the courthouse. Kyla May stood near a black SUV, hoodie pulled over his head, sunglasses in place despite the overcast sky. The same way he dressed when we were undergrads, and he was ducking campus security for hacking the registrar's office. "You're early," I said, approaching. Kai shrugged. "You said it was urgent. And you know, I owe you." I handed him a flash drive. "This has everything. Emails, timestamps, doorbell camera backups. I need it cleaned, time-stamped, organized into a single report." He looked at the drive, then at me. "You're not playing around." "I stopped playing when my sister nearly died." He nodded. "Okay, I'll work fast. And clean." We parted with no goodbyes, just purpose. As I walked away, I felt my phone vibrate again. Another call from my legal contact. "Rylan," she said immediately, "Darren's team filed a new motion this morning. They're accusing you of coaching Narina to fabricate her testimony, obstruction and possible defamation." I let out a small laugh. "Well, of course they are. They're trying to paint you as the mastermind, big sister pulling strings." "Let them try," I replied flatly. "I've been underestimated by men like him my whole life. Just be ready. This isn't just about Narina anymore. They're coming for you too." I didn't bother asking why. I already knew. They couldn't discredit Narina unless they made me the villain. The narrative was shifting, and I was stepping right into its crosshairs. After leaving the courthouse area, I drove straight to the hospital. Narina was still in recovery, resting in the same room she'd been in for days. Her face looked better, less pale, but her eyes still held that distance I'd seen before. The one where she'd gone somewhere far inside herself to avoid breaking in front of everyone else. I knocked softly before stepping in. "Hey," I said, voice gentle. "You up for company?" She gave a weak smile. "Only if it comes with coffee." I raised the cup I'd brought. "Black, no sugar." "Just how you never liked it." She chuckled, faint but real. "Guess I've changed." I handed her the cup, then sat in the chair next to her bed. We sat in silence for a while. She sipped. I watched. "Rylan," she said after a few moments. "Yeah?" "I'm sorry you're going through this because of me." I turned to her. "No, baby girl. I'm going through this because of them." She nodded, biting her bottom lip. I should have left earlier. I thought, if I stayed quiet, things would get better." They always make us believe that, don't they? Before she could answer, the door creaked open. Lumen stepped in, all polished and poised, with a bouquet of flowers that looked too perfect to be genuine. "Oh," she said, surprised. "Didn't realize you were here." I stood. "Just leaving." She smirked. "How noble of you, turning this all into your own personal crusade." "Some things are worth crusading for." She placed the flowers on the windowsill. "You know, this isn't going to end well for you." I stepped closer. "You think this is about me?" Lumen didn't flinch. "You think turning this into a soap opera wins you sympathy?" "No," I said, low and firm. "But it wins us truth, and you're not even worth a headline." I brushed past her, heading for the hallway. But I stopped at the door and looked back. Tell Darren he should have picked a quieter woman to silence. Back in the corridor, I pulled out my phone again and began documenting everything. Every word from Lumen, every gesture, the way the nurse on duty looked nervously between us. Later that afternoon, I returned to my condo and opened the folder I'd been building for days. Inside were copies of Narina's medical admissions, screenshots of Darren's texts, hospital security footage timestamps, and now, my own affidavit. A story built from facts, layered, dated, undeniable. I reached out to the nurse who first admitted Narina that night. "Ms. Ashton?" she answered, confused. "I just need your account," I said. "The truth. Whatever you saw, whatever she said, put it in writing. Please." She was quiet for a moment, then softly, "I'll send it to you by end of day." And just like that, another piece fell into place. By nightfall, I was back at my desk, rereading every sentence. I adjusted phrases, reordered paragraphs, checked for clarity. The document was sharp, precise, unapologetic. It didn't just protect Narina, it exposed everything Darren tried to hide. And on the very last page, right above my signature, I typed the final words. "They wanted a war. I'll give them a reckoning." The street was quiet when I returned to Darren and Narina's house, parking across from the mailbox like I had 1,000 times before. The porch lights were off, the blinds drawn, and from the outside, it could have passed for any ordinary home. Neat lawn, trimmed hedges, seasonal wreath still hanging on the front door. A picture of suburban calm, but I knew better. This house was bought with lies. Time to unlock some doors. The spare key still worked. Narina had given it to me after their wedding with a smile and a joke, just in case I ever lock myself out and Darren's being dramatic. Back then, I thought it was cute. A quirk. Now, it felt like she'd left a breadcrumb behind for her escape route. Inside, the air was stale. Not from time, but from performance. The scent of fresh lavender and floor polish hit me first. The place had been scrubbed clean, overly clean, staged like a real estate open house, or worse, a cover-up. I moved slowly, letting the silence settle around me. Every floorboard creaked under my steps, each sound echoing louder in my chest than in the room. The living room was spotless, no sign of the rug that had soaked through with Narina's blood. A new one in its place, different color, same pattern, as if nothing had happened. The wall near the stairs, once chipped at the baseboard, had been patched and painted. Too fresh, still smelled like primer. I made my way toward the entryway where the Ring camera used to be installed, tucked just beneath the overhang by the door. Gone. The screws had been removed. The mount? Replaced with a decorative metal hook. For what? Wind chimes. I looked closer. Paint still tacky to the touch. He'd scrubbed the house of his guilt. Or tried to. But tech had fingerprints of its own. Back inside, I slid into Darren's home office. A mahogany desk sat perfectly centered under the window, minimalist to a fault. Just a closed laptop and a wireless charger. What caught my eye, though, was the smart system panel beneath the thermostat. Nest, linked to their camera feed and motion sensors. I'd helped install it when they first bought the place. I pulled a small adapter from my coat pocket, inserted the flash drive, and accessed the hidden backup directory I knew Darren hadn't wiped. Deleted logs, motion triggers, video thumbnails marked with red dots, retrievable files. Most recent one was dated 3 days before the attack. The day she called me, the day she almost didn't survive. I downloaded everything. While the data copied over, I walked through the house again, checking Narina's old routines, the kitchen drawer where she kept her planner, the nursery at the end of the hall. The crib was still there. So were the decorations, the moon and stars mobile I had gifted her, still gently spinning above a folded blanket. And tucked into a corner of the crib, underneath the plush bunny, was a small zippered pouch. Curious, I pulled it out. Inside was a baby bracelet. Gold, delicate, the kind you buy more for sentiment than function. I turned it over, heart catching, as I read the inscription, "You always protect me." I didn't remember giving it to her. Maybe she bought it herself. Maybe it was meant for the baby. Or maybe it was a message for me. I sat down slowly on the edge of the glider chair next to the crib, gripping the bracelet like it was a lifeline. She still believed in me, I whispered aloud, voice barely audible in the stillness. Even now. The download pinged complete from the other room. I stood, wiped my eyes, and returned to the office. The drive now held 4 deleted video clips, 2 audio recordings, and full motion logs. As I reviewed the timestamps, one clip stood out, marked 5:41 a.m., the morning of the attack. I opened it. The video began inside the foyer. Narina walked in from the hallway, moving slowly, both hands cradling her stomach. She paused, rested against the wall, clearly in discomfort. Then Darren appeared. His voice was inaudible, but his body language wasn't. He gestured sharply, aggressively. She shook her head, tried to walk away. He grabbed her arm, she pulled free, and then he kicked. She collapsed immediately, sliding down the wall like a dropped curtain. Her hands reached instinctively for her belly. Darren stood there for a moment, staring down, then walked into the kitchen. I paused the clip. Couldn't breathe for a second. There it was. No more ambiguity. No, she fell. No, she's clumsy. Just raw, undeniable violence. I played the clip again, this time with the audio overlay that followed a few minutes later. Apparently, the system auto-recorded when loud noise was detected. Click. Then Darren's voice. "She won't speak. She's too scared. Trust me, I know how to shut her up." That was it. That was the nail in the coffin. I copied the files to a second drive, locked both in my bag, and walked back through the house one last time. As I stepped outside, I glanced back at the porch swing. We'd built it together, the first week they moved in. Narina had picked the blue cushions because they reminded her of the sky in April. Darren complained they clashed with the shutters. She kept them anyway. I ran my fingers under the edge of the swing, and there it was, carved faintly into the wood. N+B, Narina and the baby. Their initials, a simple mark of hope. I took a photo and walked to my car. No rage this time, just clarity, and the quiet determination of someone who knows she's holding the match. Tomorrow, I bring this to court. The next morning was gray, sky pressed low, wind cold enough to cut through wool. I didn't sleep the night before, not really. I watched the hours pass in silence, coffee going cold beside me as I rehearsed every possible outcome in my head. But when I walked into the courthouse, dressed in charcoal and armed with truth, the fatigue melted into a quiet steadiness. The air inside reeked of perfume and pretense, but I brought truth in my bag. Security checked my ID, barely glancing up as they scanned my purse. They didn't see the weight I carried wasn't in my laptop or my folders. It was in my chest, under my skin, wound tight into every nerve. Still, I smiled at the guard. I nodded to the clerk. I walked like I belonged there, because I did. In the waiting area outside courtroom 2B, Darren sat with his attorney. He wore the same expression he always did in church. Respectable, polished, void. The only tell was his knee bouncing under the table. Rehearsed confidence always had a crack. His lawyer glanced at me, then leaned over to whisper something. Darren didn't respond. Isolde arrived 10 minutes later, holding a stiff leather purse like it was armor. She didn't look at me. Neither did Callista, who followed behind, face unreadable. Then the wheelchair came. Narina was smaller than I remembered. She wore a navy sweater that drowned her shoulders, and her face had a pale yellow tinge under the fluorescent lights. But her jaw was set. I walked over. "You okay?" She nodded once. Let's just finish this. We were called in. The courtroom wasn't full, but it felt packed. 2 rows of observers, some hospital staff, some community members, a few unfamiliar faces who were probably reporters pretending to be interested parties. The judge was already seated. Let's begin, she said briskly, adjusting her glasses. Darren's lawyer opened with a speech that made my stomach turn. A tragic accident, Your Honor, he said with just the right amount of sympathy. A fall, nothing more. My client deeply regrets the circumstances and the fear it's caused his wife. But what we see here is not abuse. It's misunderstanding, compounded by emotional instability on the part of Mrs. Voss. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. He continued, As you'll see, the medical report indicates no signs of external trauma. There is no history of violence. And the alleged witness, Mrs. Ashton, is hardly impartial. I could have stopped breathing in that moment, and the judge wouldn't have noticed, but I didn't. I waited. When it was our turn, my attorney stood. Your Honor, we'd like to submit evidence from a recovered smart home system, videos and audio from the morning of the incident. The judge raised a brow. Is the chain of custody documented? Yes, we have the technician's affidavit and timestamps linked to the cloud. The clerk walked the flash drive to the judge's assistant. Within minutes, the courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the projection began. The video played in silence. Narina appeared on screen first, walking slowly through the hallway, her hands cradling her stomach. Then Darren. He stepped in, gestured aggressively. No sound, just body language. She tried to walk away. He kicked. The courtroom gasped. Narina crumpled to the floor, arms instinctively wrapping around her belly. And then, he stepped over her, not around. Not to help. Over, like she was furniture. The judge raised her hand. Pause. The still frame showed Darren mid-stride, Narina motionless behind him. The room was frozen. Mr. Voss, the judge said slowly. We just watched her not trip. Darren's mouth opened. I thought she caught her foot. Sit down, she said, voice flat. We'll continue. Darren sat. My attorney stood again. Your Honor, we also have a surprise witness who has asked to speak, someone who lives next door to the Voss residence. The judge nodded. The door to the courtroom opened, and Marlena Brooks stepped in. 73 years old, floral blouse, shaking hands, but her back was straight. She took the stand and held up a small audio recorder. I didn't want to get involved, she said, voice trembling, but I heard the scream. I live alone. My windows were open. I heard her yell and then him shouting and a thud. She played the clip. The sound was raw. Narina's voice, panicked. Darren's voice, furious. Then the unmistakable thud of a body hitting tile. I'm not trying to take sides, Marlena said, looking at the judge, but I couldn't sleep since it happened because I didn't say anything, and that wasn't right. The courtroom stayed silent. Even Darren's attorney looked like he'd swallowed gravel. The judge turned to Narina. Mrs. Voss, do you wish to speak? Narina hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, painfully, she wheeled herself forward. I stayed because I believed him, she said, voice steady. Every apology, every excuse. I thought I could love him enough to make him better. She paused. The room waited. He made me believe I deserved it, but I don't. And my daughter doesn't either. She turned and wheeled herself back without waiting for a response. The judge nodded, then lifted her gavel. This court acknowledges that the submitted evidence is substantial and credible. We will reconvene tomorrow for further proceedings. The gavel hit the block. It wasn't over, but it had begun. I exhaled for the first time all day. And we're just getting started, I whispered to myself, picking up my bag. The courthouse felt colder the next day. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe it was the weight of everything that hadn't been said yet. I stood outside for a moment, folder clutched under my arm, letting the wind bite at my face. I wasn't dressed for sympathy today. I was dressed for war. Today wasn't about survival. It was about ending a cycle. Inside, The hum of fluorescent lights and quiet murmurs wrapped around the hallways like a slow-moving tide. Kyla May was already waiting near the water fountain, hands in his coat pockets, headphones slung around his neck. His presence was unassuming, like a man just passing through. But I knew better. "You sure about this?" he asked, without a greeting. "More than I've been sure about anything in a decade." He gave a small nod and followed me down the hall. The courtroom wasn't as full as the day before, but the atmosphere had changed. There was tension, yes, but it was tinged with anticipation. Whispers fell quiet when we walked in. Darren sat next to his lawyer, shoulders a little higher today, chin slightly lifted. He hadn't seen the witness list. That was intentional. The judge entered, glasses perched at the end of her nose, robe flowing with measured steps. She didn't waste time. "Ms. Ashton, you have new material for the court?" I rose. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm calling Mr. Kyla May to testify as a technical witness." Darren's lawyer began to object, but the judge lifted a hand. "Let's hear him first." Kai walked to the stand, cleared his throat, and set down a small device. "Your Honor, I was asked to recover and authenticate data pulled from the smart home system used by the defendant. In the process of reviewing that content, I came across a backup audio message dated approximately 4 weeks prior to the incident. The message was flagged as deleted but remained in the cloud." The judge leaned forward. "Proceed." Kai pressed play. Darren's voice filled the room. "She's no better than the last one. They all crack. You just have to push." No context, no laughter, just a cold, measured confession. There was a sharp intake of breath behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Isolde. The judge blinked once. "Was this voice authenticated?" Kai nodded. "I ran a comparison through 2 systems. It's consistent with Mr. Voss's voice on file. 98% match." Darren's face had drained of all color. The judge turned to his attorney. "Anything to add?" "We request that this evidence be reviewed thoroughly before assigning weight." "It will be," she said curtly. "For now, it remains part of the official record." I sat down slowly, hands folded in my lap. We weren't done yet. My attorney rose, handed the clerk a thick envelope. "Your Honor, we are also submitting an emergency motion for full temporary custody of the minor child in question. Included are statements from hospital staff, digital logs, video footage, and now the recovered audio. All establish a pattern of emotional and physical endangerment." The judge flipped through the documents briefly. Her face didn't change, but I saw her eyebrows twitch. "Motion granted," she said. "Effective immediately. Full temporary custody is awarded to Mrs. Narina Voss. Mr. Voss is to have no contact until further review. A court-appointed observer will review all future visitation, if any." A gasp. Maybe from someone on Darren's side. Maybe from someone who still believed this would end quietly. It wouldn't. After court adjourned, I gathered my things slowly. Darren approached in the hallway, his lawyer a few steps behind him, obviously trying to pull him back. "You just couldn't let it go," Darren hissed. "You had to blow everything up." I didn't flinch. I looked him right in the eyes. "You kicked the wrong woman," I said quietly. "And you underestimated the wrong sister." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing else. As I walked away, I heard his lawyer mutter, "This doesn't look good. You need to lay low." By noon, the story had already made the rounds. Clips from the courtroom were shared across local news outlets. Tweets circulated with captions like, "He stepped over her like she was nothing." Nurse testimony was quoted on Facebook. Kai's audio file found its way into TikTok montages titled Gaslighting 101. By the next morning, Darren's company released a public statement. "We do not condone violence in any form. Mr. Voss has been placed on immediate leave pending internal investigation. His church removed him from all leadership duties. His mother, who once called Narina fragile with a smile, declined to speak to reporters." The dominoes fell. Not because I screamed, but because the truth finally had a microphone. Later that week, Narina and I sat on her hospital bed, watching it all unfold on her tablet. She stared at the screen, eyes wet, then whispered, Why did no one believe me until I bled? I took her hand. Because you were quiet, I said. But now the world hears you. She nodded once, then pulled the blanket higher over her lap. That night, back at my place, I opened my laptop again. I had something to say, too. I began typing the headline, How We Lost My Sister, and Got Her Back. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Time to rewrite the story. The porch swing creaked gently beneath me, swaying with the breeze. Its blue cushions had faded from the spring sun, but they still held the warmth of every afternoon spent watching the baby nap, of every quiet conversation whispered between two sisters rebuilding a life. 6 months, and the silence doesn't scream anymore. The neighborhood was waking up around me, lawnmowers buzzing, a dog barking 2 doors down, someone unloading groceries from their trunk. Inside, Narina was humming in the kitchen. It wasn't always like that. There were still moments when her voice caught, when she'd stop mid-sentence, because the clatter of a dropped spoon sounded too much like something breaking. But the humming was new, and that mattered. The nursery had changed, too. We'd painted it together, soft green with hand-painted clouds across the top trim. It was her idea. I want her to grow up knowing softness, she said one evening as we cleaned brushes. Not just survival. She and the baby had moved into my house within a week of the final court ruling. There wasn't a question, there wasn't a conversation. I just cleared the guest room and bought a second crib mattress. Narina folded the baby's clothes with care, like she was tucking away fragile paper. I never asked her what that process felt like, and she never offered. Our days became rhythms, shared meals, late-night feedings, teaching the baby to giggle, to hold her bottle, to reach for her mother's face with sticky, joyful fingers. I'd taken a part-time teaching role at the local community college. Nothing fancy, just public speaking and crisis communication. Enough to keep my mind moving without anchoring me to anything too heavy. The department chair called it community restoration. I called it breathing room. But even with all that, healing doesn't move in a straight line. There were still days when Narina startled at the doorbell, nights when she triple-checked the locks, moments when she'd grip the phone a second longer before answering, waiting for a name she didn't want to hear. During those moments, I didn't tell her to move on. I walked with her. Some wounds become part of your skin. I remember one night in April, a thunderstorm rolled in fast. The wind howled through the window frames. I woke to find her standing in the hallway, baby in her arms, eyes distant. I didn't know if it was wind or something else, she said, voice barely audible. It's wind, I told her. But let's sit together just in case. So we did, 3 of us, curled up on the couch, a lullaby playing softly through the baby monitor. In May, the community center reached out. They were hosting a panel on domestic abuse survivors and wanted Narina to share her story. She said no, then maybe, then, finally, yes. The auditorium was small, tucked behind a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. The walls were beige and boring, and the folding chairs creaked every time someone shifted. I sat in the back row, baby in my lap, her fingers wrapped around mine like ivy. When Narina walked up to the mic, the room quieted. No one clapped, no one shuffled. She adjusted the mic like she'd done it 100 times and spoke. My name is Narina, she said. 6 months ago, I was in the hospital with internal bleeding and a baby who almost didn't make it. For a long time, I believed it was my fault. I believed if I could just be softer, quieter, more understanding, he'd stop. She paused. You could have heard the air conditioning click on. But what stayed with me wasn't the bruise. It was the moment my sister believed me. That's when I cried. Not loud, not messy, just a slow, steady ache behind my eyes. When the panel ended, strangers came to her. One woman hugged her and whispered, I thought I was crazy too. Another said, Your story sounds like mine, but I never had a sister. Outside, the baby had fallen asleep against my chest. I watched the sunlight flicker through the leaves as Narina came out, still holding the bouquet someone handed her at the end. She sat beside me. I didn't think I could do that, she whispered. I never doubted it. That night, while Narina bathed the baby and I cleaned the dishes, my phone rang. Isolde. I stared at the screen for a full minute before answering. Hello? There was a pause. Then her voice. Measured. Careful. I saw the video. The one from court. I figured. I should have. I didn't know. I leaned against the sink, water still running. You didn't want to know, I said softly. And that's something you'll have to live with. She didn't argue, just said, I hope she's okay. She will be, I replied. She already is. I ended the call without another word. Later that week, I finished the blog post I'd started after the court ruling. The draft had been sitting in my documents folder, untouched since the night of the verdict. But now the words came easily. When we let them stomp on us in silence, they learn it's okay to crush louder next time. But when we rise, even our scars speak. I clicked publish. The baby was babbling from the nursery, her voice full of nonsense joy. I walked in and found her standing, really standing, for the first time, one hand gripping the crib rail, the other flailing like she was trying to fly. You did it, I whispered, scooping her up. You stood. She giggled, a sound that cracked something open in me. I held her close and kissed the top of her head. No one will silence you, baby girl. Not on my watch. What would you have done if your own mother doubted your pain? If your family chose silence while you bled? This wasn't just a story about one woman, it's about the hidden wounds that live inside too many households, and how speaking up, even when no one stands with you, can still change everything. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, reflection, drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true, emotional family stories that need to be told.